My name is Estella Hatchful, and I am a communications and health consultant. And I'm also an avid gardener and budding artist. So I'm so excited to be moderating this panel today. We have indeed a very diverse and accomplished group of panelists. And so I'm going to jump right in and do some quick introductions, and then hopefully we can get right into the meat of things. So first on our panel, we have Dr. Yao Bediako, who is a research fellow at the West African Center for Cell Biology and Infectious Pathogens, WACWIP. He's also the founder of Yamache Biotech Limited, which is Africa's first cancer research company. In addition to Dr. Yao, we also have Lucia Adai, who is a pharmacist by training, an adventure lover, and during the day, she is the executive assistant for the Pharmaceutical Manufacturing Association of Ghana and also the West African Pharmaceutical Association. So thanks again, Lucia. And then we also have Darlington Akoto, who is the founder of the AI Mino Labs, and I'll get into what he does very shortly. He's also a fellow agricultural lover, and we're very excited to have all three of our panelists speak to us today. We are hoping to be blessed with one additional panelist, and that would be Dr. Judy Giukoria. She is working at the she's an assistant professor of radiology and informatics at Emory University in the United States, and hopefully she'll be joining us very soon. So this topic of medical research is just really very interesting. And as I was thinking about it and talking to our panelists, I actually thought about the game of football. The game of football is played everywhere around the world, and there's so much money that is spent on it and so much money that's derived from it. And when we think about the game of football, the main aim is to win. When we look at medical research, it's a similar situation. Lots of money is spent on medical research. Lots of money is actually derived from medical research, and it goes on all around the world. And the main aim there is to win in health information, to win in disease prevention, and to develop cutting edge technologies to save our lives and improve them for the better in the future. Just a few bits of information that I found very interesting. So in 2018, China spent $553 billion on medical research and development. The United States came very short second with spending about $511 billion on medical research. On the flip side, companies, pharmaceutical companies like AstraZeneca, Pfizer, and GSK also made profits in excess of $33 billion in 2019 from all of their sales, and that really derived from medical research. So as you can see, there is a lot going on in the field. Countries all around the world are taking part. And another interesting tidbit was that when we looked at the top 90 countries that invested in medical research, only 4 of them were African countries. So that's South Africa, Egypt, Uganda, and Ethiopia. And these are figures from 2018. So once we think about this, we know that there's a lot going on. And we're fortunate to hear from our panelists today about what they're doing and their opinions about a lot that's going on, especially with COVID. So without further ado, I'm going to jump right in, and I'll ask Dr. Yao Bediako. So if you can talk a bit about what you're doing, how you got involved in medical research in the first place, and what you're doing at WACWIP. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Estella. And hi, everybody. It's great to be here. I've heard about Ahaspora for a while, so it's nice that I'm finally on an Ahaspora sort of platform, and I guess I should probably be working to sign up. I know quite a few people who I guess, Ahasporans, but I haven't officially joined. So as Estella said, I guess I'm an immunologist. I'm a medical researcher. Spent, I'd say the last probably 15 years working in some capacity of research, whether, starting off with my graduate work in the US and then following that up with postdoctoral fellowships in Kenya and then in the UK. And then last year, achieved my goal of moving back home to hopefully establish myself as a young professional working in Ghana and contributing to what I hope will be a thriving research ecosystem. So I guess in terms of what I do, my work for the last 6 years has revolved around malaria. So focusing on immunology of malaria, understanding immune responses to malaria, trying to figure out why, despite lots of money being pumped into research into malaria, over the last probably over 20 years, we still don't have an effective vaccine. Malaria has proven to be one of the most challenging sort of diseases to tackle. It still kills 500,000 people every year, mostly children under 5. Ghana is one of the high burden countries. Ghana alone accounts for 4% of global malaria. If there are any Nigerians on the call, Nigeria, everything is bigger. Nigeria accounts for 25% of the world's malaria cases. But when you compare Nigeria's population to Ghana's population, a tiny country like Ghana accounting for 4% of global cases of any disease shows that we're still right up there. So I've been doing that for several years, and that is what sort of has brought me back to Ghana. WACBIP, for those who don't know, my director may be listening, so I have to give a shout out to WACBIP. WACBIP stands for West African Center for Cell Biology of Infectious Pathogens. That's why we just say WACBIP. And basically, WACBIP is a 6-year-old center at the University of Ghana, established through a World Bank grant of upwards of $9-10 million initially to establish the center 6 years ago. And the center has since then leveraged that initial funding to generate more funds, significant multi-million-dollar grants from the Wellcome Trust to the UK and from other funding agencies to really drive forward biomedical training in Ghana. So everybody has heard of Noguchi Memorial Institute. That has been around since the late 70s. WACBIP is much younger, but we work closely with Noguchi on medical research. But unlike Noguchi, that really doesn't really have its own training programs. WACBIP is primarily focused on postgraduate training. So we have master's and PhD programs that we run at times in collaboration with Noguchi and in some projects on our own. And over the last 5 years have trained over 200 Ghanaians at the master's and PhD level, about 80, well actually not just Ghanaians, but Africans, about 80 PhD students so far have gone through or in process of going through our system, fully funded, PhDs that will cost about $100,000 each. So that we're quite proud of that. And then we have about 150 to 160 master students who have gone through or are in the process of going through. So that's not bad for a 6-year-old center to have contributed 200 people at a graduate level of the highest standards. So that's what I do at the university. Estella mentioned something about Yamachi. Yamachi is my new project, and actually a couple of my co-founders are Ahasporans are on this call. Yamachi is a biotech company. I might get a chance to talk a bit more about what led me to move from academia into biotech. But biotech is basically private research. It's something that's unheard of in Ghana, but it's very, very common in many parts of the world, many industrialized countries, where private companies do basic to sort of, you could say, translational research, taking work from academia through a pipeline and then ultimately heading towards big pharmaceutical companies. So big pharma obviously account for a lot of the money and a lot of the products, but big pharma don't like to get their feet or their hands dirty in basic science. And so they wait for biotech to do that work for them. And so I've been pulled into trying to do biotech because of the realization that research in Ghana is purely academic. And if we stay there, we will never go anywhere. Really, as Estella said, Africa accounts for 1% of global research output. We have 11% of the population. We have 20-something% of the disease burden, and we have less than 1% of the research output. And that is multifactorial, mostly because there's no money locally going into research. So government puts less than 0.25 or 0.5% of our GDP is invested in research. Compare that to industrialized countries where significantly more money is pumped. The US puts almost 3% of its GDP into research. Malaysia, which Ghana always compares itself to because of palm oil, in 1996, Malaysia only put 0.2% of its GDP into research. Then they switched up. Now they put 1.3%, and we all know where we are now compared to a country like Malaysia. So research is important. We need to put money into it as public money, but sometimes the government needs an incentive. And I believe that private industry can show government that research can be lucrative and can be profitable. And so that is the pull to try to establish a biotech company. That will hopefully be the first of many that will drive our research out of the classroom and into where it needs to go. So I tend to talk too much, so I'll end here, but I'm happy to take questions. And obviously throughout this discussion, hopefully I can weave elements of what I see as the challenges that Ghana faces. And really, indeed, not just Ghana, but Africa in general really faces now in terms of medical research and the problems that will happen if we don't do more. Because currently we're not in charge of our own destiny. COVID has made that all too apparent. We are completely beholden to international aid agencies. Even HIV care in this country is funded internationally. The government of Ghana does not buy HIV meds for people in Ghana. And so if Trump decided to turn off the tap tomorrow, people in Ghana would not get HIV meds. And I think that is, and I think across Africa, it's not just Ghana. I don't mean to pick on Ghana, but too much of it is PEPFAR, Gates Foundation. All the money comes from big organizations, and we need to start solving these problems ourselves. So that's my bit for the beginning.
Awesome. Okay, so Lucia, we are going to pass on. She's going to tell us exactly what the answer is, and then also give us a bit about what she is doing as an executive assistant at the Ghana Pharmaceutical Association, the Pharmaceutical Association of Ghana and the West African Pharmaceutical Manufacturers Association. I hope I got that right. Lucia?
Yes, hello. Thank you so much, and good evening to everybody. Okay, so my name is Lucia Ade. I'm the Executive Secretary for the Pharmaceutical Manufacturers Association of Ghana and also for West Africa Pharmaceutical Manufacturers Association. Okay, so as the name connotes, we manufacture medicines. So we make sure that medicines are available in Ghana. So in Ghana, there are 36 members, and there are lots of policies that must be put in place to protect, support, promote the industry. I should speak a bit about my background. So I'm a pharmacist by profession. I've worked a bit in hospital, and then I worked in community, where you call the pharmacy shops. I moved on to the multinational companies. I worked with AstraZeneca. I promoted their gastrointestinal and respiratory portfolios. And I moved on to Roche. Roche is a Switzerland-based organization. I promoted the oncology portfolio, moved to Johnson & Johnson, American company, and also promoted their oncology portfolio. We did a lot over the years, ensuring that cancer became priority for government, some funding for some of these disease areas, and also generally creating awareness and also advocating for whatever was necessary. So at PMAG, where I am now, there are a few policies that have to be put in place. And I am happy that the people that are listening to us know that it's important to ensure that consumers get the best medicines available. And that's what we also ensure that goes out into the public. Most of us take, Ghana produces about 30% of the medicines, the value of. And in so doing, we always have to ensure that the medicines that go out are of good quality. So the answer, I would give it in bits. So the first answer was Food and Drug Authority. So Food and Drug Authority ensures that whenever you need to bring in a medication, either the raw material, manufacture in the country, Food and Drug Authority would ensure that you are registered They know a lot about the product. So we have things like the dossiers, the drug master file, and so many other supporting documents actually analyzed. We are working towards having a bioequivalence center in Ghana, and that would be a big break if we're able to get that. What that would do is it would do two things. One, it would ensure that all the trusted dossiers, master files, documents that we have are trusted and verified. And the second thing is that it would go through human consumption, which is the phase 3 trials, to ensure that those who are taking the medications locally are actually getting the benefits that they are supposed to get, and we would avoid the side effects that we don't want. So we do post-market surveillance when drugs go out. Food and Drug Authority monitors to ensure that medicines that are taken by patients are not harmful to them. So Food and Drug Authority does help with ensuring that medications are safe. The second organization is the Ghana Standard Authority. So what Ghana Standard Authority does is that they ensure that every industry has standards. So when we say standards, standards are the criteria that efficacy would mean, quality would mean, what kind of side effects are tolerable and are not. So for every industry, so for pharmaceuticals, they do the same, aviation, the petrochemicals and the rest, they do the same. So medicines or pharmaceuticals is highly regulated, and GSA does that for us too. And then the third one was Pharmacy Council. So before you can distribute, before you can give any medication to any patient who is not a healthcare practitioner, you need to be registered with the Pharmacy Council. So you need to get a wholesale license, and then if you're going to retail to patient directly, you need to get a retail license. So the answer is all of the above, because we need the Food and Drug Authority, we need the Ghana Standard Authority, we need the Pharmacy Council, and a host of other people. We have EPA and several other organizations that actually ensure that the medicines that are manufactured, that are brought in, are not hazardous to us, the people consuming, and also the environment. So I think I've answered that, if that's okay.
Yes, you have. And Lucia, thank you so much for explaining that. So quick question out of this. So I know that a few years ago, there was a lot of discussion around fake medicines getting into Ghana. So where was the gap? What happened? Because it sounds like we have a very clear structure and procedures to ensure that all the medicines that enter Ghana that are, we purchase are of the highest qualities. So can you give us a bit of explanation as to why that happened at that time?
Okay, so anytime people in the pharma industry hear things like fake, we're a bit on the edge, because it affects our brands and it also affects the industry. It's important to note that there are a lot of supply chain channels through which medications come into the country. So ideally, you want to clear medicines through TEMA or the airport. Either you are airlifting or it's coming by ship. And then you have to go through rigorous processes to get these medications registered, the companies registered and all of that. However, there's also the possibility of having medicines in your suitcase, bags, because people get to the airports and they say, I'm taking this medication myself, my grandma, my auntie, my mother is taking this medication. And sometimes people bring good quantities of these medications in their suitcases, mentioning that it's for the family. We also know that we have a porous port or border situation. So people can just walk across from, let's say, Togo to Ghana with a suitcase full of medicines. And if they are found, they will say that they are bringing it to a relative, or if they are found, they could have one reason or another. So generally, the Food and Drug Authority kindly has been able to attain level 3 status when it comes to the WHO certification, which is a very high status. They've worked very hard over the years to ensure that there are good standards and that medicines out there are very good. They are good quality and all of that. However, because our borders are porous and because of the situation of people bringing medicines in suitcases, there's a possibility of having 1 or 2 of these medications on the market. Because even though people will come and sell them, when it's found in their suitcase, they'll still give reasons like we want to use it for personal use or for relatives or the likes. So I would say that we don't have concrete evidence in Ghana now about fake medications being sold by a particular company. What we know is that fake medications or counterfeit or substandard medications do come through the ports or do come through people's personal, dealings into the country. And the FDA has worked very hard. If you listen to some of the reports that have come in from what's happened with this medication. Okay, when it comes to mind, I'll remember. We did a lot of cleanup, going into the markets, going around to ensure that it doesn't come in, or whatever medication comes in is certified. So FDA ensures that medicines are rated very fast. Medicines of good quality are brought in, the standards are all checked, and you can actually track the supply chain. So who is manufacturing, how did it get into the country, who's supplying, who's distributing, all of that. So fake medications may happen, but so that everybody is rest assured, it's something that doesn't happen very often.
Thank you. Thank you for that explanation. So, okay, let's move on to Darlington. Darlington. Yes. So the future. We're going to do a bit of back and forth. So Darlington, if you can share with us what you're doing and talk a little bit about the data that you generate and how you use it to inform future decisions.
Okay. So my name is Darlington Akobo. I'm the founder and executive director of Nino Health AI Labs. So primarily what we do is we develop artificial intelligence solutions for healthcare. We also conduct medical research, which has to do with using AI and data science and seeing how to apply to different domains within biomedical science. Yeah, so that would be a good way to just cut that short. To answer your questions, so yeah, the kind of data we collect, it might vary from case to case. So with COVID-19, for example, in the early phase where even before Ghana put together a dashboard, we were collecting data for Ghana and then a number of other African countries. We've moved on from then to actually using that data to build predictive modeling. And what that basically means is that we can have, we can build the systems that can look at the past historical data of what is happening with COVID-19 and use that as basis to say what will happen in the next 10 days, 3 months, depending on what you are looking at. So yeah, that's one of the things we've also been working on. But that is just one application. We also build AI systems that can detect diseases. So we've been working on both a mixture of communicable as well as non-communicable diseases. So you have things like breast cancer, pneumonia, and then a lot of thoracic diseases. So we build AI systems that can look at medical images and tell you if there's any medical condition present. Luckily enough, we also associated with the global effort of developing regulations and guidelines and standards for this space of AI in healthcare. And I happen to be the lead for AI and radiology under this effort. So this is an effort by United Nations, so both International Telecommunication Union, but as well as World Health Organization. So we develop global regulations and standards to guide the development, testing, and use of AI solutions in healthcare.
Great. So with this predictive modeling, you can essentially use data from the past to kind of predict how diseases will spread in the future. Okay. So a question for me. Did you predict, or when you started especially looking at COVID data, did you predict when our curve would kind of slow down, or I should rather say speed up? Could you tell? Because it was like, we had a few cases and all of a sudden it's like, wow, we have just a lot.
Yes, I remember very early on when we had very few cases. I mean, in the early phase of just us building and experimenting with these models, we made some educated guesswork or projections. We made some projections and we said, hey, we could end up having I remember we were in the hundreds of cases, and we said, what, in the next 1 month, we could end up with 1,000 cases. Looking at the projections, people said it's propaganda work, and we are trying to sell fear, and we should, what was it, calm, not fear, or whatever the message was. And this was, and then once we got to 1,000, it took us like what, about 2 months or so to get to 1,000. And then from our analysis and our projection, it shows that we will end up in about 5,000 in right around about a month period. And people said that is not possible because it took us so long to get to 1,000. And that was exactly what happened anyway. Yeah, if you are building these models, on one hand, you don't want to run around trying to rub it in people's faces and say, we told you so.
I told you, yeah.
But on the other hand, you want to make it clear that these are only projections based on numbers, and the models are only as good as the numbers you have.
Okay.
It's prophecy, it's projections. Your mathematical models, they could be wrong in some cases, so they are not always perfect. But the more data you have, the better the model becomes.
Okay. So the more data you have, the better the model. So actually, this is a question from Stefana, which I think is linked. So what is the biggest barrier you had in getting your research started, or any unforeseen and actually seen barriers? In Darlington and if anybody else wants to answer this question. I think it's, the challenge to doing this, because it sounds like you need a lot of data, lots of numbers, lots of money. What are some of the things that make it hard for you to do your work?
I mean, in our case, it's usually the data. So you want available data, but you also want accurate data. And this has been quite a challenge with COVID-19. I mean, there's a lot of speculations as far as whether there's been actual transparency within this process. But even beyond that, there's a lot of bottlenecks, there's a lot of barriers, even for the COVID-19 response team. So with the backlogs and everything, it makes it difficult to get numbers that are solid enough for you to make projections on. As far as, funding is an issue, I think, for almost all of us in here. For majority of the work that we've had to do, if we've received funding, it's usually from donors in the international market or from the other countries. There's hardly any funding from our own government, and this is usually, a tough problem. But, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, do you want to answer that question as well, Dr. Yao?
I think for us, it all starts with resources, whether it is funding or sometimes even human resources, but typically that's linked to funding as well, because you need money to attract the talent, and you need money to buy equipment. I mean, I always tell people biomedical research is some of the most expensive research you can do. Field research, sometimes social science research, the budgets I see, I could spend in a week or even a few days. Just the nature of the work we do, the equipment and the consumables that we use would make people who are not scientists eyes water. I mean, I can spend $500 on 2 teaspoons of a particular reagent, and so it means $100,000 doesn't get you very far. $1 million doesn't get you very far. The average NIH grant to an investigator in the US is probably somewhere around $2-3 million spread over maybe 4 or 5 years. That is a single grant to a single individual for their lab. And many labs, big labs, will have 3, 4, 5 of these grants. The whole grant that established the center I work in, which we are all proud of, was $10 million or $8 or $9 million spread over 5 years.
Wow.
So the money that an individual investigator in America is getting to run his or her lab within an institution is the equivalent money that an African university is given to start a center. So, another good example, where I worked in the UK, our annual budget was 110 million pounds. That is the annual budget for a single center by comparison, the Wellcome Trust, a UK charity who does a lot of funding for research in Africa, gave about 60 to 70 million pounds to 14 centers in Africa over 5 years. So we're all excited that, yeah, it's great. You know, it's a lot of money to do research, but when you compare, we are expected to compete. All right. People are saying, why don't we have a vaccine in Ghana? Why can't we generate a vaccine? Yeah. Well, it's exactly because we just don't have the infrastructure. It's not that we don't have the talent or the capacity or the human capacity, but we just have not invested sufficiently in the infrastructure. And so we lack the resources. And in some cases, we lack access. So, you know, many companies that manufacture the inputs that we use don't view Africa as a very good market. I mean, Lucia might be able to speak more about it. It's similar with the pharma industry. They view Africa as a place where you have to give your stuff away for free. So they don't make it a priority necessarily they certainly don't do much R&D here. And so procuring reagents is very, very difficult. So when I buy a reagent, I probably pay, even though I have less money to spend to begin with, I pay probably 5 times what my competitor in the UK or the US pays for the exact same thing, because they have economies of scale. Their institution will buy on their behalf. They will get all these discounts because the companies are trying to compete with other companies. In Ghana, there's no real market. So they would charge me an arm and a leg plus shipping. So for us, to be honest, I don't think there's any other challenge bigger than financial resources. Money is not the answer to everything, but what holds African scientists back and prevents us from generating the data that Darlington and his team would like, to be honest, it comes down, in my opinion, simply to resources. And I think the problem we have is, for too long, we've been waiting for someone to bring us the resources. You know, we are handing, arms stretched out, waiting for Bill Gates to give us money. And that is not sustainable. And I think till our institutions, our universities become serious about being research intensive and doing what they can to raise funds in many unconventional ways, until our governments begin to recognize the value of research, not just when we have a pandemic, but to realize that we need to help our institutions to be better supported. It's telling that the 2 most advanced centers in Ghana are Noguchi and KCCR. One is founded, funded, supported, would not exist without the Japanese government. The new building, $25 million from the Japanese government. Every instrument in that place is labeled with a Japanese flag, gift of the people of Japan. I've worked there. I can take a picture for you next time. And then KCCR is German money. Where is the Ghanaian money? I mean, the new Infectious Disease Center, it's a great start, but it's a hospital. It's not a research center. I think, we have to be honest and not be defensive. Let's be honest about what we have and don't have, and then address these things as we go.
Okay. All right. This is a good segue, I think, into the next question. Oh, sorry. Lucia, did you want to add your voice to this question?
Yes. So not to belabor the point that funding is very important, but just to elaborate something. For you to get a medicine out, it actually takes about 20 years. And the reason why it takes that long is because medicines either need to be extracted from plants or from biological sources, or it has to be synthesized through chemical sources, chemical processes. And once you do that, you need to be able to ascertain that you have it at the right dose over the right period. And that means formulating it into maybe a tablet, capsule, infusion, injection, or something. And then you go through the clinical trial. So it goes through stage 1, where you give it to smaller animals. Maybe you can start by testing it on frogs and other things, and then on bigger animals, and then in human beings as the phase 3. And all of this is finance. You need finance for the reagents, for the equipment, everything. But for me, I think 2 things are really serious. Serious challenges. One is the partnership, and the second one is policies. Because sometimes you may not have the money, but if you have the right people at the table to say that, listen, we have this machinery we can bring in here for you to use for a period of time. We have these people, we can bring them in to help you for a period of time. We have this or that. That can really be helpful. The right partnership also means that government is on board. I'm sure some years ago, if we're talking about assembling cars in Ghana, people would laugh. But with the right commitment, today it's here. VW is assembling cars. And I think we can do same for the pharma industry. And not just assembling, we can actually start making small parts of the car in Ghana because it's been done elsewhere. And then eventually we can make the whole car here because we have a lot of the equipment and everything that we need or the raw material here. The second one is on policies. So you bring some of these machinery in, it's already expensive, and then there are taxes on it. You know, everything is taxed, you know, from the NHI levy to VAT and all of that. And before you realize it, that's 25% of the cost. So if a machine is maybe $100,000, you have another $25,000 coming in as charges or taxes. So even if it's free, all that money just to clear it is still a lot of money, and that comes to policies. There has to be that clear commitment from government, from private sector, saying that we are going to make this work. It's not about being afraid or about coming up with conspiracy theories or anything of that. It's about deciding that we need to put our destiny in our hands. We need to do something about the situation. We have lots of plants around us. And of course, the plants have some use because in the past, we can all attest that our ancestors have used it for one thing or another.
Yeah.
The thing is, what are we doing sitting around and not harnessing all of this? There are so many good things around us. I mean, I had a comparison with some other industry like the cement industry, where currently everybody is saying because of the dollar, cement is going up and is making buildings very expensive. Meanwhile, the cement industry just needs clinker, which comes from clay, which we have in abundance, which we can just create from here. But we have to send all that clay out, and then somebody extracts it for us, brings it back, and then sells it to us at a very expensive price.
Yeah.
And we keep making that mistake over and over again. And we need to get to that point where we decide that enough is enough. We are going to do something about the situation and get it done.
That is great. I really appreciate the emphasis that you made on the policy and the partnerships, because it sounds like often some people want to do it alone, but especially in the field of medical research, it's next to impossible to really make advances. And definitely in Ghana, in the continent, we really need to make advances without waiting for external handouts. I guess as a public health person, one of the biggest challenges that we face in doing our work is just wrong ideas, misconceptions, and just wrong information. So I'm going to hand this question back to the panelists, and then we can talk a little bit more about, well, actually answer some of the questions. We've got some very interesting questions on the chat. But how much does just wrong information impact your work and make it more difficult or maybe even easier? So that's a question for the panelists. Great.
Should we address the answer of the poll first?
Yeah, please answer the question. Answer the question. Let's answer it.
So all the indications are that it came from a bat. So we do know it wasn't lab. We do know it was definitely not lab generated. The sequencing suggests that it evolved naturally. And most coronaviruses, bats tend to be many viruses come from animal hosts initially before they get into humans. And this one looks a lot like bat coronaviruses. There's talk that it may have also gone through a pangolin, which is another type of animal that you find. So it is possible. The market theory, typically you have these wet markets in China. So it's possible that it started off in a bat, maybe going to a pangolin that may have been in one of these markets. And so that's how it would initially have got into humans. But most likely it came from a bat, as many viruses do. So that is all the scientific evidence points to the fact that it was naturally evolved and it passed through the animal and adapted to human. And basically it's just one of those things where we were predicting that eventually a virus would come that would have all the features to be highly transmissible, and allow human-to-human transmission. And the viruses finally got it right. I mean, that is basically the law of averages. Eventually something like this happens. So I really don't think the conspiracy theories of whether China made it, certainly Donald Trump is doing his best to to promote this as a China virus. I don't think that is entirely fair. China actually worked extremely hard to contain this virus and actually did much, much better, at least if we believe all the reports. Of course, we don't always know whether we can believe all the Chinese numbers in terms of how many people have it. But they are certainly, whatever be the case, they have done much, much better than America. And for the sake of Ghana's situation, our COVID did not come from China, in the sense that the people who brought it to Ghana were from Europe and North America. So that, WACBIP, together with Noguchi, we sequenced, everybody has heard we sequenced the genome. We did 15 to begin with. We've done 46 in total now. We're going to do a few hundred. All the evidence points to the fact that the COVID that is in Ghana came from Europe and North America. People returning from Europe and North America brought it to Ghana. So it actually wasn't, in our case, it actually wasn't Chinese people that brought it here, although the virus itself obviously was first identified in Wuhan. And I would say the Chinese government actually, in many ways, did everything they could, it would seem, to contain it, and had some success. But as we see globally, it's really difficult to contain this virus, and it was probably just a matter of time before it would spread. So I think it's a bit unfair to label it as a Chinese problem. I think that is just, if anything, America is the epicenter and are now spreading it everywhere. So if we are being fair, America is now responsible more for the pandemic than even China, in the sense of where the most cases are presently. You're saying about, should I answer about the how these fake news stories impact our work? You wanted, Estella?
Yes, you can do that. And then I have like two other questions from the chat. So, yes.
Okay. I mean, I think I've almost left several WhatsApp groups during this COVID thing because I've just got so annoyed with the nonsense that I see. And to be honest, it's frustrating because it's the educated people who are sometimes the most wrong. And I think there's nothing more dangerous than an educated person who doesn't know what they're talking about, but because they consider themselves to be educated, they don't listen to anything. I think there's a famous quote, I'll look it up, but it really gets frustrating when people who are very smart and are very accomplished in their areas don't know where their line of expertise ends. It's like me arguing with a lawyer about the law. It's not my field. I will respect your opinion and I'll listen to you. But when it comes to science, everybody thinks they're an expert because they read something on Google. And it's been quite frustrating because it really hampers our ability to really control the virus in this case. If everybody's worried about, especially when it comes to vaccination, when we do have a vaccine, there are reports that about 40% of Americans do not want to vaccinate. Now that's going to be a huge problem. Right now we don't have a vaccine, but if you actually go through the process, like Lucia was saying, getting a vaccine in 12 months will be a miracle. In 18 months will be a miracle. It's never been done before. So if we actually succeeded, and then some people decided that, I don't believe in vaccination, I think that's an affront to all the people who are working hard to try to control, and all the people who've died trying to solve this problem. So, this kind of misconception can become very damaging when it affects our ability to control the disease. And so for me, the anti-vax movement, as an immunologist, somebody whose life's work is to try to come up with vaccines, it's one of the most frustrating things because they are mostly people who should know better, who are educated, moms in Oregon and other places like that, middle class, relatively well-to-do people who've never seen measles before. And so decide I won't vaccinate my kid with measles. And unfortunately, I'm beginning to see that trend in Africa too, where, educated, relatively well-off people just think, there's poison in the vaccine, and there's no evidence for that. So I just say we should be careful how we absorb some of this information. Oftentimes it's right, it's right or left wing, whichever way, propaganda, and it's usually pretty much nonsense.
Ooh. Use the nonsense word.
Oh yeah,
Ouch.
I don't mince my words when it comes to this. It's because people are dying.
Ouch.
Right, people die because of these things, and so we can't be soft about this. We have to be firm. If you see a kid with measles in this day and age in America, it's pathetic. Why should kids be dying of measles in America when they have access to the vaccine? In Ghana, the same thing. If we had measles, why? It's available, it's free. So these are preventable deaths, and unfortunately, people who die are people who maybe wanted to vaccinate, but their kid was just not old enough to get the vaccine. So that's where I think we have to be socially responsible. Sorry, I'll shut up now.
Okay, so just some questions off the chat. Number one, are there any ethical considerations you take into consideration with your work, thinking about discussions around testing for virus vaccinations? So yeah, what do you think about, and this can go to anybody, and Darlington too, please chime in, and Lucia. Before, actually, specifically for Lucia, before we manufacture any medicine, what are the ethical considerations that we have to go through before they get that stamp of approval from the FDA, from the standards board, from all of the relevant organizations? Yeah.
Okay, so ethical issues, that's big. Before any medication comes out, it needs to go through a lot of processes, really rigorous processes. And I would say that if we're supposed to write the ethical rules, it will probably be a book very big, maybe from where I sit to, I don't know, somewhere very, very far away, because it involves a lot of things that you need to be careful about. And that's why in clinical trials, you need to ensure that you are documenting everything. You are not over giving anything or under giving anything. And I wanted to support the point that Dr. Biak was talking about when it comes to misinformation. It is very dangerous, very, very dangerous. Because what it does is that people either abstain, don't want to take the medication, or they overdo it or underdo it. And the drug I was trying to remember was a tramadol example. So we had lots of people abusing tramadol, and the tramadol they were abusing wasn't the regular 100 milligram or 50 milligram that we had in the market. It was 225 and some other weird combinations. And when we did some investigation to find out why people were bringing it in, it was because of misinformation. People were getting the idea that if you go and do labor work, masonry, carpentry, and that you needed something that could help you bounce back, you just had to do tramadol with maybe some Coca-Cola or something of the sort. There were young guys who were using it to enhance their sexual performance and all sorts of weird things. You know, even though, yes, in some instances, because of the psychological excitement, you can actually stimulate yourself to do some of these things. It doesn't necessarily mean that the use of that drug is intended for that use. And I mean, it was dangerous because people were using it, abusing it, and eventually becoming addicted to it. So ethical issues, what's the ethical issues? There are a lot of things that will be written as rules that you need to ensure that you comply with when you are doing clinical trials. And the ethical ones usually are unspoken about. But if you miss any of that, it means that you can lose your license as being a professional. It can even mean that you can go to jail, you know, if you make mistakes, because medicine can be a poison depending on what dose you take it at. And also the fact that sometimes millions of people are taking this, if you are not careful, it's more like a biological weapon where lots of people can either be affected or killed. And I can give you a classical example, the thalidomide example, where several women were taking thalidomide for morning sickness, and little did they know that a little down the line, they were going to have babies with deformities, serious deformities. Some hands not coming up, and then some parts of the body not coming up. And this is serious. These are irreversible things. And even though you just wanted to prevent something as simple as morning sickness, you have to live with a child, because you cannot kill the child. It's criminal. Yeah. You need to live with the child with that deformity, and that child may not be able to do anything. So I think you cannot belabor the point that ethical issues or drug manufacturing is serious business. And that's why it takes so long. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of money. It takes people with patience to be able to test, make mistakes, try. And sometimes it's interesting to know that we have a lot of medications that actually get to phase 3, and sometimes they do not pass for simple things of maybe one side effect or another. you know, the fact that the drug eventually may cause cancer or may have some cardiovascular is heart issues. They may have some heart issues or something. The drug just fails. And it doesn't matter how much money or how much resources has been put behind that medication. It's just taken off the shelf. If you don't remodify it, that's the end of it. So you need to really be serious about it. And there are several ethical issues, I mean, when it comes to drug manufacturing. But of course, you need some training to be able to understand what goes into it. And there are several rules, several equipment, several things that goes into ensuring that the right product or the right drug is given to a right patient at the right dose for the right indication.
Wow. Okay. So I think I'm going to ask the question that most people are thinking right now. You said that it takes 20 years to get a medicine out, literally from stage 1, testing with small animals, stage 2, testing with bigger animals, and stage 3, testing with humans. So we have been told by several people all around the world that we are going to have a vaccine for COVID-19 by the end of this year. Is this true or false? Is it even possible? Are we just being fooled? What's the answer to that one?
Okay, so in all fairness, it takes up to 20 years to actually develop a product. What happens is that if we need to bring a product out very fast, what we do is we look through all the medications that have failed and what the indications were. So if there are medications that we formulated for, let's say, a virus indication, hepatitis, something for malaria, fever, something of the sort, and then we believe that it's able to cure symptoms that are similar to COVID-19. Scientists will now pick some of these molecules and start modifying them really fast to see whether we can get them to pass. So if they fail because of one side effect, then we'll look at probably reducing the dose or taking it at a very small dose over a long period of time to see whether we can get that effects that we want, or we probably take a standard dose for a very short time. Because in drug management, what you want to do is you want to balance between efficacy of what the product is going to do and ensure that the side effect is not very detrimental. So it's that balancing act that sometimes gets some medications either approved or, to fail. So it could happen, and like Dr. Bediakon said, it can't be a miracle because it means that so many people have to put in so much work. We may be lucky, we may have to build an immunity.
Vaccines are a little bit different because vaccines have to be specific to the pathogen. So till SARS-CoV-2 revealed itself, we could never have had a vaccine against SARS-CoV-2. What they have tried though is use backbones, use bits and pieces of vaccine technology that they have, they developed for Ebola or for other viral pathogens, and then began to build upon those platforms to make a vaccine. But it is, for instance, you cannot take the Ebola vaccine and modify it for SARS-CoV-2. It won't work. But what you can do is take how you made the Ebola vaccine, and then since you've built all that pipeline, then it's quicker to now try to develop the SARS-CoV-2. But certain things, especially in immunology, cannot be rushed. So phase 1 is really just to see whether or not the vaccine is safe. Phase 2 is now seeing whether or not you get an immune response. And as I've told, I think, a number of people, immune response doesn't mean protection. Immune response just means your immune system saw whatever the vaccine was and mounted some kind of a response. Now we're entering phase 3. I think there are 6 vaccines out of the over 120 that are in development for SARS-CoV-2. There are 6 that are in phase 3 trials. This is when we begin to separate, the wheat and the chaff. This is when we will know if any of these vaccines are any good. Now, in terms of whether we will get a vaccine by the end of the year, Russia claims to have one, but then now everything has gone silent, so I don't really know what's happening there. Mm-hmm. There are a number of US and UK based researchers who are in the phase 3 trial. We will know, I think, within the next couple of months, whether or not any of these are showing promise. I suspect the threshold for a vaccine will be lowered. So usually they only license vaccines that are above 90 to 95% efficacious. But in this case, because it's an emergency, it's a global emergency, a global pandemic, the numbers are so large. If a vaccine gave 50% protection, they'll probably still license it for use. But then on the flip side, if our vaccine is only 50% effective, that means we're only protecting 1 out of 2 people. Now, when you have over 25 million people globally infected and it's spreading, then how useful would a 50% vaccine be, right? Will it continue? Will it flatten the curve? Probably not. And so I think it'll be a while, even if we have a vaccine, unless this vaccine miraculously is really, really effective. I think we can expect that the world will be grappling with this well into 2021 and possibly into 2022 in some form. It doesn't mean there'll be lockdowns everywhere. It doesn't mean the restrictions will be the same, but we'll still have to be aware. Now, obviously in Ghana, it appears as though for whatever reason, we still don't fully understand why, the clinical manifestations have not been as severe as other parts of the world. It could be linked to our age, being a younger population in Africa compared to Europe and North America. It could do with exposure to a whole bunch of other things that have sort of tuned our immune systems in certain ways. So the question here locally is, I believe there's much more COVID in Ghana than reflected in our numbers. I think this is what Darlington was hinting at. We have begun to do at the university, we began to do certain antibody studies that will just give us an idea of prevalence. And I can tell you for a fact that we go to markets in Accra and we get double-digit numbers of positives. These are not people who are sick, but these are just people who have antibodies to COVID, or to SARS-CoV-2, meaning that they were exposed at some point. Well over, I don't want to steal our thunder to reveal all our results, but it's well over 20%. Okay, so that suggests that a lot more than 40,000 people, or 42, whatever the number currently is, have been exposed to COVID. So vaccine, I think we wait and see. We will know whether it will be early next year if these first 6 vaccines prove to be useful. If all these first 6 fail, then we are in trouble because the rest are way behind in their development. So we have 6 front runners. It's a race. Everybody wants to cash in. If one of these 6 make it, then probably by March, maybe, or maybe even the summer of next year, there'll be a licensed vaccine, because I'm sure they'll push it through regardless of its level of efficacy. But the question we should be asking is, when do we stop having to worry about COVID? And I think that will definitely be end of next year, early following year, because once the vaccine is out, how many doses can they make? How are we going to get it in Ghana? I mean, Gavi, once again, aid agencies will come to our rescue. They will buy some. But America and Europe, Western Europe, will buy everything for themselves first, and then they'll start sharing. People are talking about equitable distribution, and Gates is talking. We all know when the vaccine lands, all those ethics will evaporate. They'll take care of their families and themselves, and then they'll worry about the rest of us. I think we should be realistic about that as well. I think, we saw it when we couldn't buy kits. Government of Ghana had money and they couldn't get DNA extraction kits. These are kits that typically you find everywhere. The US has refused to export them. Even face masks, you couldn't export from the US. So how much more a vaccine? Will they really export it till they've dosed everybody in the US? I think not. So, so I'm not trying to be an angel of doom, but
no, you are being hard and true. You're being honest. Yes.
We should just we should set our expectations a little bit conservatively, and just bear with it. I think it will get better than it is now, certainly, but we may not be done with COVID till probably 2021, maybe early 2022 at the current projection.
Okay, so I'm just trying to be mindful of time. We have technically 15 minutes, and there are just a few more questions, and we really want to spend some time talking about the future of medical research. So let me ask this question, and then we'll be talking some more. So are there any African COVID vaccine efforts underway? If not, are there any possibilities for a continent-wide initiative using regional networks? So this is from Gamali. Any answers to that question? Actually, he has 2 questions. Well, that's the first one. And then the second one is, do you think making COVID-19 data publicly accessible had or is having any impact on people's behavior? So two very different questions. Is there an COVID vaccine effort? Have you heard of one? Have we partnered together? Any country, South Africa? Anything
No.
going on?
I think the short answer, the long answer, the medium answer
that you've heard of.
is no.
And this is for all of the participants.
Yeah. Does anybody want to take a stab? Not that I've heard of. Can you hear me, Estella? Yeah. I'll say that no, not that I've heard of. I think at best we may be involved in testing a vaccine. We may be involved in testing a vaccine when it becomes available. And I think there was an uproar earlier on about testing vaccines in Africa and the ethics around that, and we should not be guinea pigs. I think the way we manage not being guinea pigs is by making sure that African scientists are leading some of these efforts. But there is definitely no vaccine being developed by an African country or African company. All the vaccines are either US, China, Western Europe. So not that I know of currently.
Okay. Alrighty then. Okay. Let's take the final question, and then I'd like us to spend a little bit more time talking about the future, what we can do. I know Darlington is up to a lot of things. I'd like to hear from him as well. And then just what kind of, what do we need to do? I think all of the people on this call are interested in the work that's being done. And a lot of us want to be a part of it, even though we're not medical researchers. So I think just wrapping up, like to think about what can be done to really make sure that Africa is coming up with the research and the data to make informed decisions to help our own people. And we can get access to the resources to make things happen on the continent. I think that African governments have been, have they handled the COVID-19 situation well? Yes or no, or unsure? So I'm hoping that you can use your experience to answer that question for us.
I would have to say, so a good answer would be yes. And this would be on the basis that from a data point of view, right, some countries, especially European countries and even North America, they had their first cases early January. Their response was very slow to it. For most African countries, this delayed until somewhere in March, and then our response was almost immediate. Now, the historical advantage is that we got to see the effect of delaying response to COVID-19, and so that helped us somewhere in March, and then we were able to quickly respond. Now, if you also look at the data, if you compare COVID-19 cases in the various African countries and you plot it on a log scale in comparison with COVID-19 in other parts of the world, what you do see is a clear difference between how the numbers are rising. Now, this could be a number of factors at play here. It could be that the spread is happening dramatically differently. We can see that there are way more mild cases in Africa than there are in other parts of the world. There's that. Some would argue testing, but generally, if you look at when we decided to shut down the country, close our borders and all that, individual African countries, some did a whole lot better than others, but generally responded far quicker than the other parts of the world. But then again, there's always so much more that could be done. Yeah, for me, one thing I'm looking forward to is African governments making evidence-based decisions in connection to COVID-19. So we shouldn't be saying, hey, we have the numbers and we have the people and all that stuff. It should be that if we are currently speculating that we want to open up the borders early September, I would love that because there's so many places I want to go to, but it will be really good if that decision is based off of modeling and simulations to see what will happen if we do open up the borders. But not even just that general zooming in and then understanding how do we open the borders safely and also manage to keep our numbers good. So that is what I'm hoping that will happen, not just in Africa, but globally, that we start to have this evidence-based decision making on the government level, but then on literally every level as well.
Okay, I think you've already answered partly my final question. So 10 years from now, what would you like medical research and medical decisions made by governments to look like in Ghana and on the African continent? And how will we get there? That's the question to you.
Yeah, so we want to, in a very crude sense, what we are attempting to do is basically automate a whole lot of healthcare, and also change to some degree the approach towards biomedical research. So in a very reductive sense, you could reduce biomedical research to trying to find patterns within data, and this usually requires domain knowledge. So you spend years studying to be able to understand the data before you and find connections. This is the connection that leads you to finding either vaccines or even finding the best way to diagnose conditions. So what we are doing, I mean, so even some of the work that we did together is looking at it from the perspective that there are stronger patterns to be found when you collect a lot of data, but then if you collect a lot of data, it becomes difficult for human beings to be able to make sense of that data. So more and more what is going to be happening is that you have computational tools. This is going to be AI, data science tools that are going to be taking a lot of biomedical data and then making discoveries out of that. But that is for the research. Now, if you look at it in the healthcare scenario, we do not have enough experts. Our ratio in Ghana of doctors to patients is still somewhere about 1 to 10,000. That is horrible. So more and more we'll need to automate some of these processes. AI systems, the ones we've been developing, the ones others are working on, more and more they're performing just about as much as human experts anywhere in the world. So the process would have to entail using more and more of these systems where you automate portions of healthcare. My personal vision is that the future of, probably a lot of people don't like to hear this, but my vision would be that the future of healthcare, the future of the hospital is no hospital. There's no brick and mortar hospital. Everything is happening real time, and then you have medical nanites that are within your systems. They are running predictive models. They are looking at your data in real time. They are trying to detect anything that is happening within your body and responding to it in real time. So that is what I believe is going to happen. It might take a few years, well, not a few years, it might take a whole lot of years, but gradually healthcare is going to start moving towards that direction of real-time automation and then personalized as well.
Wow. I'm going to pose the same question to Lucia. So 10 years from now, what would you like the pharmaceutical industry to look like in Ghana, on the continent, and how do you believe that we can get to that point?
Okay, so before I answer that question, I think we missed one of the questions. We missed a question like, does the data, putting out the data help in any way? I was going to say yes, because in this time of a lot of misinformation, it's important to ensure that you have the right data out there to spread calm and not fear, because it's dangerous for people to be speculating that there are 1 million cases when there are 40,000 or 44,000 cases. So I just wanted to put that in perspective. Okay, so I want to probably go a bit beyond even drug manufacturing. Currently, we do a lot of packaging, and we don't do formulation. We more of get the raw materials and then, okay, sometimes formulate and then pack the medications. 10 years from now, I'm hoping that we can make our own medications from scratch, extract it and actually formulate, go through all the clinical trials, having our bioequivalence center in the country, on the continent. I think I've heard of something like designer babies, where people can pick and choose what their kids should look like. So I want my child to have blue eyes. I want them to be tall. I want them to have this kind of face, that kind of thing. I'm hoping that 10 years from now, we'll be able to develop technology to the extent where people can predict their diseases before it even comes about. So we can predict to say that I'm just going to have only headaches. I'm not going to have maybe hypertension or diabetes. And then in the event that you should even have whatever disease it is, you can actually have the medications for it. I'm hoping that we won't have pandemics like these. We wouldn't be taken by surprise by viruses. And even if they come up, we'll work a bit more faster to be able to get drugs or get vaccines to be able to prevent them. How we can achieve this is by actually finding the right partnership policies, being committed to actually ensure that this happens. Being committed means that we need the right human resource, we need the brains, we need the money, we need the know-how. So if they need tech transfers, technology transfers that has to be done, we need to look at how we are going to make it happen. And that means putting together a strategic document that says that in 10 years, this is what it should look like. And these are the tactics to ensure that this happens. We are taking our destiny into our own hands. We are not going to wait for anybody else. This is what we expect, and this is what we are doing about it. Thank you.
Sounds like something that Ahaspora needs to champion, putting together that strategic document. It sounds very interesting, non-partisan, and definitely for our people. Awesome. Dr. Bediako, final thoughts. Where should we be in 10 years when it comes to health research, when it comes to our health, and how will we get here?
Okay. I mean, 10 years sounds like a long way, but it's not that far.
It's quite close, actually. Yeah.
We're saying Vision 2020, and now it's here, and it brought Corona with it. I mean, I guess I don't know where we will be, but where I hope we are. I mean, I don't think I'm quite as optimistic as Darlington. I don't think we'll have nanites in 10 years, but I hope that we will be at least on a path towards self-sustainability. And what I mean by that is we will, as Lucia said, we would have taken our destiny, as it were, into our own hands. We will be self-determining our research agendas because we will be either self-funded, as in, local funds, whether it's government or private enterprise. And even if our funding comes abroad, it will no longer be in the form of grants and aid, but it will be in the form of capital investment, which investment is based on the realization that you are a good business model to support because you're going to make me money. And I believe that changes the dynamic. It's no longer the have and the have-nots. It's basically you are an asset. You are something worth investing in. So I hope that in 10 years, medical research not just in Ghana, but really on the continent, will be self-determining, will be self-sustaining, and will be data-driven. I agree entirely with Darlington that, Africa is a unique continent. We are the most genetically diverse. We have the most linguistic diversity of anywhere in the world. I mean, we are just the most diverse continent. Even, we get lumped together as a place of lots of problems. We may have the most diverse problems as well. But we are a place where you could do real, basically I like to think of it as the human race. Once we get our act together, there are great developments, there are great technologies, there are great advancements that can only really be developed in Africa because of the perfect mix of human and natural resources that we have. So I really believe that if we can get beyond our problems and our sort of self-inflicted as well as externally inflicted challenges, that we can get to a point where we are innovating. We are not just adapting or implementing. We are too happy with just copying. I think Bright Simmons has written a really good piece a while back about our love of just copying and other people's technology and trying to adapt it for the African setting. I hope that within 10 years, we will get to the point where we begin to look at our problems and generate innovative, locally generated solutions for our problems. And this obviously applies across all research, but within biomedical especially, I believe Africa has certain advantages. We are the only place in the world where you can continue to study the role of infectious disease and non-communicable disease. How infections cause cancer, for instance. You can't do it anywhere else. And so I think there are ways that we can understand disease that can only be done in Africa. Right now we are at risk of being robbed again. Our natural resources were taken. Now our DNA is going to be taken. There have been stories of Ebola. COVID will be another one. They will come, they being, Western scientists, will come and want our samples because they want to understand why Africans did not die the way people died in Europe. Those discoveries have to be done by African scientists. And the only way we can sort of safeguard our future is by taking responsibility. So finally, I would say for those who are not scientists but are interested in supporting, it's more than just building a hospital. It's more than bringing hand sanitizer to Noguchi or gloves or buying a few DNA kits. Let us invest in basic research. Let us invest in the next generation of researchers. So I would love to see, I'd love to see private businesses and private individuals making donations beyond just the low-hanging fruits that we typically see. Invest in a scholarship at a university to endow a PhD, pay for someone to get a PhD. Invest in the biotech, but ultimately invest in things that may not be short-term wins, but are long-term big return. Because I think we tend to do the short things. I was volunteering at Noguchi and people brought us rice and tomato paste, and it's great. I appreciated that. But for everybody who brings rice, we need 10 people who will say, how can we equip a lab so the next time SARS-CoV-3 or whatever it is comes to Ghana, there's actually research that can actually lead in developing a vaccine. So I think we need to think bigger in terms of how we support. Whether we are working as scientists, think bigger for ourselves, and then people want to support, think big. It's bigger than just the immediate needs. We need to invest in building capacity in the long run. So that's where I hope we'll be in 10 years, that we'll have an ecosystem, a thriving biotechnology ecosystem with companies like Mino Health, Yamachi, whatever, in addition to a bunch of academic-based research, really leading the front in researching diseases that affect us, and really being global leaders, not just Ghanaian or African leaders. So.
Yeah. Great words. I have just been writing. I've got like a good 10 pages of points, and I think in summarizing everything up, I'm actually very energized and encouraged. Even though we may not have a vaccine for COVID-19, I am reminded of the power of us as African people and the things that we can do. We obviously have an amazing team of very intelligent people who are leading the cause when it comes to medical research. And I think we all play a part to getting more people on board. Even if you are not, in the medical field, your words to speak to somebody, we have mentees, could encourage them to delve into this field. And we definitely have the power. We have the resources, human, we have the natural resources. And I think what's lacking is just our commitment, partnerships, and getting the money. So for all the people, the business people out there, I think this is something, it's a long-term win, but it would be a big win for everybody. So my parting words are, let's get involved. Let's ask the right questions. Let's not spread the fake news. Let's figure out what the right news is. And for those of us who are not as exposed, let's bring them on the journey. I mean, we all have aunts and uncles and people that don't have the right information. So let's take it upon ourselves to share. So this has been great. Thank you so much to all our panelists. And Christabel, I'm going to hand over to you. I think this was a really interesting discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Estella, and to all our panelists. Like you, I definitely learned a lot. And I do want to commit us to helping to define the future of medical research. So we will definitely be in touch with you as Ahaspora, Darlington, Dr. Bediako, and Lucia, amongst others, to see what we can do to help define this path forward. We will have 2 more panel discussions in this series. The next one is on agribusiness, looking at Africa's green gold and how we can tap into it. Like today, we will bring young, dynamic Africans who are working in the agricultural space. And then after that, we'll take a look at the money. Where is the money? Who is giving? Who is taking? And how do we do all of that? So please do tune in. We will be on social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and all of those other fun places. And tune in, keep the discussions going. And above all, please act. Not too much talking. Let's take it to the streets as we're doing and make it happen.